We are starting this year off with a bang by talking about openings that start off with a bang. I'm Shalise from Forward Chess, and today we are going to talk about the most aggressive chess openings. And we are starting off with the King's Gambit. If you don't know what a gambit is in chess, it is where you give something up, most likely a pawn, to get something in return, such as a space advantage or a head start in development, anything like that in the opening that gives you some kind of compensation for the piece. And because this opening takes place mostly on the king's side, that's where we get the name from, King's Gambit. So white starts off with e4, black goes for e5, and white pushes the king's pawn forward, f4. With Queen's Gambit, this happens on the queen side of the board, and that's where these opening names come from. Just a little FYI. Now, this might seem a little funky, and I guess it is, because white is opening up this king, opening up this possibility for checks, and a lot of theory has developed from this. It is okay to play. A lot of aggressive players, of course, that's why we're here in this video, would opt for this as white. And basically black can choose to accept the gambit by capturing the pawn, or not by playing d5 or something else like that. We're going to look quickly at what happens when black accepts the pawn. White's main move here is knight f3, getting that head start in development. And the main move, or a more popular move these days, and in general in this opening for black, is to play g5, and we get some really aggressive lines coming from this. G4 comes, and basically both sides are just out for the kill. But let's say black plays something normal, like a move like knight c6, just developing. Now we can see the reason for this whole gambit taking place in the first place, and that is because white has removed black's pawn from the center, which enables white to put a second pawn in the center. And if you know a little bit something about opening principles, you'll know that this is basically your aim in the beginning. You want to get control in the center, you want to develop your pieces, and in this way white has given up a pawn, but it's easy to get this pawn back with the bishop later on, and there's more than enough compensation in this position for that. Let us take a look at a famous game in this line. Now, if you know a little bit something about chess history, you will know about the Romantic era in chess. Romantic chess is characterized by just vicious attacks, sacrifices, stylish games, basically. Winning with style was the goal. And we have two players here, Paul Morphy, Adolf Anderson, both quite aggressive players. Paul Morphy, considered to be the first unofficial world champion, player way ahead of his time. And we are looking at a casual game between these two greats in the King's Gambit. So King's Gambit is very much a romantic opening, and not in the sweet kind of loving way, but more in the aggressive and tactical way. So let's take a look at the game. e4, e5, f4, our King's Gambit. Black accepts it, which was common in this time, accepting gambits for these exciting games. Knight f3 and g5, the line we just slightly mentioned. White goes for h4, black starts a pawn storm, g4. Knight e5. Knight f6, normal looking move, but white gets the pawn back, or so it seems, giving up the e4 pawn. d3, kicking this knight away, knight g3. Now, it looks like black is doing pretty well. This knight is really strong, it's attacking the rook, it's just in white's space. But white has had a lead in development. And we can see that with bishop takes f4. Now white has two pieces in the game, black only has one, and by accepting this rook over here, black basically doesn't have any pieces in the game. And that's why this game went the way it did. Let's take a look. Queen e2, of course, black's king is nice and open, so you want to take advantage of that. Queen e7, a normal looking way to block the check, but in comes knight f6. Of course, this queen is pinned, so the knight is not hanging, black cannot capture. King d8 tries to run away. Now a nice attraction tactic. Bishop takes c7, pulling the king towards the c7 square so that white gets this beautiful fork with knight d5. King d8, white picks up the queen, bishop takes e7, and now of course white has the queen, but black has gotten a lot of material for it. You would think that maybe black would be able to hold a position like this, but because of black's lack of development, that doesn't happen. Queen g4, d6, black is trying to develop, bring another piece in. Queen f4, this queen is just a little too strong. And this knight on h1 is just sitting there looking pretty, not doing much. Rook g8, queen takes f7. Black's pieces are not working together, so black is unable to really create any kind of attack. Rook e8, knight a3, bringing another piece into the mix. Knight a6, queen h5, attacking these loose pieces. Bishop f6, knight h1. This knight was going to fall eventually. Bishop takes b2. Looks like black is picking up more material with by forking this knight and this rook, but it's too slow. Queen h4, king d7, rook b1. Take our knight, please. Black does exactly that. And queen a4. There is not much black can do here. Black does not have enough material. Black's pieces are just not doing much, and Anderson resigned in this position. So we can see the chaos from both sides. If white starts with King's Gambit, they're basically directing the game to an aggressive type of situation and play, and black, they're always black can avoid it, of course, but I would say this is the type of opening that black doesn't really have much choice. Right, so very fun. I wouldn't play this myself. I think it's a little bit out there. You really need a lot of confidence, a lot of pizzazz, aggressive pizzazz in chess. So yeah, but do take a look. It is quite fun to play, and yeah, good luck with learning the King's Gambit. Next up, we are talking about the Sicilian Dragon. Now, there are a lot of Sicilian openings. This move is just, this name is just characterized by e4, c5. Dragon is just one of them, and it is probably the most aggressive out of all of them. If I had to describe it in a certain way, it would be that it is a death race between white and black. Let's look at the first few moves, and then we will look at a game to see exactly what takes place and how aggressive it can get. So e4, c5, white plays knight f3, black plays d6, and white opens up the center with d4. Black accepts, white captures, knight f6, attacking this e4 pawn, knight c3, defending the pawn, of course, and then black plays g6. Now, the idea of g6, of course, is to bring this bishop to g7, and this bishop becomes what is known as the dragon bishop. Quite a feisty name, and that's because it's a feisty piece. It is quite an important piece for black in this opening, and white will try to trade it off with ideas like bringing the bishop to e3, queen to d2, and bishop to h6. These are all ideas you'll learn in theory, and about theory, this is one of those openings where you really have to study. Of course, in general, you have to study your openings thoroughly, but with the dragon, everything is so memorized up until many moves that there are many nuances you have to understand in order to be able to play this aggressively and be able to handle the attack from white. So if you're going to do this, do it fully, learn as much as you can, and understand the opening well. Let's take a look at a game between Vishy and Kasparov, two greats in chess. So in this game we have Vishy as white and Kasparov as black. E4, c5, all the moves we just looked at, starting off with the dragon. Of course, we only looked at like 5 because we don't want to get too deeply into things, but a lot of these moves will still be theory up until, you know, like move 20. So bishop e3, bishop g7, the dragon bishop wakes up, f3, castle, queen d2, knight c6, bishop c4, bishop d7. White castles on the queen side. So because we have opposite side castling, and basically this applies to most openings with opposite side castling, it will naturally be an attacking game, because of course one side is attacking on the king side, the other side is attacking on the queen side. So this is exactly what happens in the Sicilian Dragon. Knight e5, kicking this bishop away, bishop b3, rook c8, and this is a really integral part of the Sicilian, that you get this e5, you get the c file that's nice and open for the rook, and it happens to be looking exactly at the king, and we'll see the king kind of scooches over to b1 to get off of this c file. h4, starting the kingside attack, h5, blocking white's pawn marching forward. King b1, knight c4, takes, and we can see this black rook is already super active. Knight d2, b5. Black just starts marching on the queen side. Bishop h6, this is what we mentioned earlier about white trading off this dragon bishop. And in this game, we couldn't exactly see the full potential of the dragon bishop, but I do encourage you to go look at games where the bishop is a major piece. Queen a5, black doesn't care too much because the attack has already started on the queen side. Bishop takes g7, knight f4, rook c8, bringing the other rook into the game. Knight d5, asking black if they want to trade queens. Now, you would think by trading queens, the game will be a little bit less attacking. You know, the queen is the strongest piece after all, but that isn't what happens. Black accepts the queen, sacrifice, the queen trade, not a sacrifice, that would be quite big. Knight takes, king f8, defending this e7 pawn, rook e1, rook b8, b3, rook c5, knight f4, and a lot of, I guess, subtle moves have been taking place, but what black has done is kicked white's knight away and has kept pressure on the c file. King b2, a5, storming forward, a3, king g7, knight d5, this knight just keeps going back to where it wants to be, bishop e6, b4, trying to kick away black's rook, but unfortunately this just helps black's rook get to somewhat of a better place. This b4 pawn is very vulnerable right now, and even though this looks like a nice fork of the rooks, rook takes b4, king a3, and rook takes c2, check. This nice tactic allowed black to win material without losing any of the rooks. Because, you know, of course, if white captures black's b4 rook, white will capture the c2 rook. And if white captures the c2 rook, of course we've got lots of checks happening here, and discover checks as well. You can take a look at the full game on the Forward Chess blog, as you can with all games. Let us look at our next opening. The next opening we are looking at is called Evans Gambit. So Evans Gambit is one of those openings taught to youngsters, although it is played in by adults, by stronger players, of course, but not as much, I would say. It's not as solid, so you will find it in younger kids' games. And let us take a look at what this opening is. e4, e5, white plays knight f3, knight c6, very standard. Seems like it's going to be a bit of an Italian, but here is where the mess starts. After bishop c5, white decides to play b4, gambiting this pawn, which black captures with the bishop. Afterwards, white plays c3. Now black needs to decide where to go with the bishop. In this line, because black hasn't played d6 yet, bishop e7 is possible, otherwise bishop a5. The whole idea of what is happening here is that, let's say bishop e7, is that white has opened up the queen to come to b3. And that is one of the options. White can play that immediately because white is hitting this f7 pawn. Other lines also include white just opening up the center with d4 immediately. There is some cool theory here. White needs to be prepared to play with the pawn down, and black's best response usually is actually to give the pawn up, give the pawn back. So a lot of good theory here. A nice way to start your journey if you're just getting into aggressive openings. Do take a look at the Evans Gambit. Now we are going to see a game by the creator of the opening himself, and yeah, let's take a look. So we are taking a look at a game between the creator of the opening himself, Captain William Davies Evans, and you'll see that this is a game from the Romantic era. So of course they wanted to be quite attacking in these days, as we spoke about. So naturally games were started off like this. So let's take a look at our first moves. Here in this game, white castled first before just going bam, b4, d6. But now with b4, the black bishop isn't able to come back to e7. So the only choice is bishop a5. White decides to go for that center, d4, bishop g4, queen b3, putting the queen on the light square diagonal as we spoke about. Queen d7, black defends this f7 pawn. Knight g5, the pressure continues, and now a nice little idea. White exchanges pawns in the center for two reasons. Well, one main reason, and that's to open up lines. The first line is this d file, and the second, which we'll see in the next move, is this dark square diagonal from a3. This bishop is sitting nice and pretty, looking over at the black king and really freezing the king. Knight h6, black puts more defense on this pawn. f3, kicking the bishop away, of course opening up the king, but white's king is a lot safer. It just scooches over to the corner, nice and safe. Bishop h5, rook d1, taking advantage of that second file that has been opened. Queen c8, and now white could have easily won with a move like queen b5, but of course, romantic finesse. White opted for rook takes d8, a sacrifice. A lot of sacrifices in this time weren't very sound. Of course, they didn't have computers the way we do. They just played with passion. But rook takes d8 is a scary move to face over the board. In any case, black accepts. Knight takes f7. This is quite a nice little move. The idea is that black cannot capture back because checkmate is coming. If black captures bishop takes f7, then we can just capture back. Knight takes f7 and queen e6 checkmate. And of course, if the knight captures, knight takes f7, white has bishop b5, and then the queen is coming to e6 checkmate as well. So black instead opts for queen h4. Queen b5 check, and this king doesn't have many defenses left. Bishop d6 checkmate. Very aggressive, 20 moves actually, and a lot of fireworks on the board. Let's take a look at our next opening. The last line we are going to look at is called the Dutch defense. Now, I know defense, why is this in an opening video, but basically, it is a strange line that has the, I would say, similar ideas to King's Gambit in terms of opening up the king side. And that is because after d4, black plays f5. This is the Dutch. Black basically is expanding on the king side. G6 comes quite often, knight f6, g6, bishop g7, and black plays like that. But of course, it is quite strange to start off your game pushing your golden pawn, pushing your f pawn. So this had to make the list, of course. Let's quickly take a look at a game by two chess greats on the Dutch, and that is Muzichuk and Krumling. So this game did end in a draw, but there were so many fireworks in the game on the board that we had to include it, of course. It's quite a long one, so let's go through the first moves quite quickly. Pierre Krumling is playing as white, Anna Muzichuk is playing as black. Anna goes for f5, g3. In our opening phase, in the beginning, well, we've got two fianchettos from white, and it's starting off pretty slowly, but we'll see this changes quite quickly. Queen e7, knight c3, c6, bishop a3, and basically here we are starting with black, who will be expanding on the queen side. Let's take a look at that. Rook b8, again quite slowly, starting off e5 comes. Basically, these pawns are just marching through towards the black king, and this is quite scary to play against. Knight b2, e4. Even though it looks like black is just giving up material, black is going for the kill on the king. So this little a7 pawn doesn't matter in the larger scheme of things. f4. E3. Now f3 blocking some things, but again this king is quite lonely and most of white's pieces are on the queen side. Of course, Krumling held on very tight, very sturdy, which is probably why this aggressive game ended up in a draw. Queen e7 saying no thank you to trading queens. We want to keep this strong piece. And at this point, black is still going for the attack, even though after some trades it's made more difficult because you want to have more pieces in the game when you have such a big attack going. Rook d1, of course, all these trades is what has made this scary position a little bit easier for white to handle. Queen takes g3, knight h5, queen d6, and black has to trade queens, has to accept the trade. Of course, white is able to save the game, and even though there's a whole pawn sitting on e3, so close, and white has the bishop pair, nothing much can come from that because this light squared bishop on f1 is not doing much, and when it eventually can do anything, it'll be a little too late. So repetition, draw by repetition. And yeah, this game ended in a draw, but only because they had to. They were obviously not playing for a draw. This is not a boring game at all, and you can get a lot of interesting games from the Dutch defense. Of course, learning a new opening is never an easy task, but it helps when you have a book written by authors who know quite a bit of what they are doing. And in our blog post, we have shortlisted books for each opening if you want to get started on your aggressive chess openings journey. For King's Gambit, we have The King's Gambit by John Shaw, Dragon, The Fighting Dragon by Paul Powell. First Steps E4 E5 by John Ems includes the Evans Gambit as an option. And of course, the Modernized Dutch Defense by Adrian de Muth for learning the Dutch. You can find all of these books on Forward Chess, and as you can see, free samples are available for every book if you just want to get a little bit of a sneak peek into what it actually has to offer. Let us know in the comments what your favorite aggressive openings are, and maybe we could cover it next time. Until then, bye.